13 weeks of action. The Just Stop Oil have undertaken 13 weeks of continual activity looking broadly to disrupt London. And in terms of how we get to the numbers, what we've done is very simply added up the number of officer shifts that we've had to deploy each day. Each day is about 150, some days slightly more, some days slightly less. But the staggering total comes to 23,500 officer shifts in that 13-week period, all of whom could have been better spent helping local communities in London, solving crime, investigating crime and supporting victims. So we know policing protest is part of policing in London. It always has been. But this really long-standing, this 13 weeks of continual activity, undoubtedly has led to those numbers.
Well, I have a number here. This is like paying the salary of around 200 police officers. I would imagine, Assistant Commissioner, you can imagine where those men and women could be better deployed.
Of course. And to be clear, like, the Met is a resilient organisation. We're a large organisation and we're used to policing protest. But this is quite a chronic thing in terms of every single day. We've got over 150 officers who ordinarily would be policing in local communities, who are policing in and around other parts of London. And one of the challenges we have with Just Stop Oil is they don't tell us where they're going to protest. They don't tell us when they're going to take this action. They don't engage, which means that we have to put more officers on it than we otherwise would do to ensure, as your listeners will have seen, that people get frustrated when there's not a quick response. So we need to make sure there's a quick response as well.
And what areas might that be, where there hasn't been a response that would normally be what the Met would desire, because you've got 150 men or women tied up with this? What sort of areas are we talking about?
There's nothing specific. I can't say that on this shift, on this day, we would have had people, but we are pulling officers from all over London. Not only our borough officers, but also other officers from specialist units. But on every single day, 150 officers who otherwise might have been on response teams, who might have been doing other work, might have been conducting local investigations, have been taken in as part of the central command team to respond to the Just Stop Oil activity.
So can I say, it does make a vulnerability. There's a degree of vulnerability because you haven't got the blokes and women doing what they want to do. I know your men will be doing what they can and the women, I get it, but it does expose Londoners unnecessarily. That's fair, Assistant Commissioner.
So, as I said, we're resilient. We're a big organisation, but the demand is significant. And because it's day in, day out, Londoners feel it more because every shift, each shift's people may be one or two officers shorter than they might have been. But I think what's important as well is that it doesn't stop here. So you remember, and listeners remember back to the activity in the autumn where we arrested 750 people. Yeah. This time we've arrested 271 people and charged 174 as part of this phase. So all of that now needs to go through the criminal justice system. So we've got a whole team of officers from our public order crime team working to prosecute those people that have been arrested, working to get them charged, to get them through the criminal justice system. And some of those cases won't be heard until 2025. So we've got a significant amount of effort still to carry on to actually bring those people that have disrupted London to justice.
And coppers taken from the front line.
Of course, they could have been doing other things. So they could have been investigating other stuff.
Now, you and I have talked in the past, and I know that you and all your colleagues agree that we must allow peaceful protest. You wouldn't want to police a city or a country that didn't allow for that. But what have you learnt, not you personally, what have the Met learnt about policing protests as a result of these 13 weeks we've endured?
So this is really unique in protest terms, isn't it? You're absolutely right. In any democratic society, the right to protest is heavily and rightly heavily protected. It's something the Met well understand in terms of rights under Articles 9, 10 and 11 of the Human Rights Act. Critically important rights. But this isn't protest, this is crime. And there's a difference. So the right to protest is very strongly protected. But when you get into deliberately causing serious disruption to the public of London, stopping people going about their daily business, disrupting people going to work or to hospital or taking their children to school, then that tips over into crime. I think in terms of what we've learned, the speed of response is essential, but that draws slightly more people. We know Londoners are getting frustrated. What we didn't want to see and what we don't want to see is people taking the law into their own hands.
Got close to it, Assistant Commissioner, didn't it?
But we need it. So
motorcyclists driving through banners and various others.
Which is why we need to get there quickly, which is why we need to take action quickly. And the law has changed. And the law has defined serious disruption more clearly for us, which has enabled us to move more quickly during this period. So we've had to adapt to the new legislation as well.
Is slow walking illegal now?
No. It's all totally contextually based. So
What do you mean by that, Mr. Twist?
Because it's slow walking, it depends what people are doing and it depends what disruption they're causing. So you could well envisage a group of people walking on a quiet road when not disrupting anybody,
But I'm
walking
walking
slowly.
I'm walking the highway. I'm walking where the vehicles and the buses and the cars and everywhere.
Whereas if you're walking on the A40 Westway, setting it out to disrupt the traffic, then clearly that's causing serious disruption. If
Right.
you're walking on the Marylebone Road, then you're going to be causing serious disruption. So what we have to do on every occasion, and
Why
this
can't
is
we just make slow walking illegal?
because
if
that
it's
just
in the
wouldn't-
context of a demonstration, I
that
don't mean an
wouldn't-
elderly person trying to cross
because
the road.
that would cover every single demonstration ever. And of course, as we said at the start, the right to protest is fundamental, but what the right to disrupt others isn't. And things like people do around engaging with officers in advance, telling us where they're going to protest is all helpful. But it's really important that listeners understand and that we're clear that at every site, officers have to attend, they have to assess what's going on, they have to assess if serious disruption is being caused, and then balance the rights of those people that are being impacted with those that have rights to protest. And where it's clear that a small number of people are disrupting a very large number of people, it's very clear where the balance needs to be held there, and we would impose conditions and clear the road.
Lastly on this, what's more problematic for the men and women under your command? Slow walking or gluing yourself to the highway?
I say it depends on the context. I mean, what we saw in the autumn was where people were sort of locking on or gluing on. We actually dealt with them for the offence of highway obstruction because actually that was very, very clear. You'll have noticed this time what we've been doing, because people are walking slowly, it's harder to make out that offence of highway obstruction. So we've been imposing conditions under Section 12 of the Public Order Act, which was changed during this period, and then directing people to protest on the pavement. So it's a marginal infringement on their right to protest. We're saying, look, don't protest in the road, you have to protest on the pavement, versus a huge change to the impact it's causing on others.
All right. There are a couple of other stories that the Met are involved in there, which is, no, of course, you'll be no stranger to this, and as a senior officer, I've got to put them to you. An incident down in Croydon, I understand now under investigation. A number of Met officers arrested and handcuffed a woman who was wrongfully accused of not paying her bus fare. What can you tell us about this and the number of officers deployed, Assistant Commissioner?
So I gave a statement on this yesterday, and it's something that has generated strong views across, and looking at my sort of social media overnight, there's a body of people that are saying the Met have been really defensive and just don't get it and haven't changed, which I don't think is right. And there's another body of people saying that I've thrown officers under the bus, I've sort of thrown them to the wolves, is words that have been used, which again isn't right. So what we had yesterday was a lady, our Transport for London officers who are working...
Well, it developed yesterday. I think it happened earlier in the month, didn't it? The story developed on social media yesterday. Yeah.
So what we had was officers who work for our Roads and Transport Policing Command that work with Transport for London. We're on a joint operation with Transport for London ticket inspectors.
And these are quite common across London.
Yeah, they're really common. And and there's crime on the bus network, there's crime on the transport network, and the officers are there focused on dealing with more serious crime. However, when they are deployed with TfL inspectors, of course there's a chance they'll end up in dealing with fare evasion. Now, my understanding of what happened was that the lady concerned was asked for a ticket by the ticket inspector and didn't produce one. She then spoke to a PCSO and again didn't produce a ticket, and eventually ended up speaking to officers. What's clear is we're an empathetic organisation. One of our new values is empathy. Nobody that sees a young child being upset in that way would be happy about that or feel that that's, that we don't regret that happened. Of course we do. Nobody wants to see a young child upset in that way.
What would your advice to an officer be in that situation?
But this is a point.
Because my point would be, we discussed this yesterday, Assistant Commissioner, and most of my listeners said if the woman involved had shown her Oyster card or credit card or whatever, she had paid.
Yeah.
What your advice to an officer would be, you've got to stick with it. You've got to make sure this woman paid her ticket.
And this is why officers are in such a difficult position, isn't it? In that if you are there, if the ticket inspectors are saying this person is not showing a ticket, you've got to start engaging with that person. As I said, nobody wants the child to be upset, but equally, officers have a duty. They've got to do their duty. And I said our initial review led us to believe that no conduct matters had been conducted. That was our initial review.
So why refer yourself? Have you referred yourself?
Yeah.
But
that doesn't mean that we can't be mindful and alert to real
you're the
community
governor.
concern.
If you're confident, why do you need to refer it?
Because we're worried about what the communities of London think, and that rightly so.
Can't we see the body-worn cameras?
So what happened yesterday was the chief superintendent from the local borough and from the Road and Transport Policing Command held a meeting with community members, and we're talking about showing some community members the body-worn video.
Right.
But of course, there's things around data protection and protection of identity of people that need to be considered.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at a series of pictures in the Times, Assistant Commissioner.
Yeah.
The necessary faces have been, I'm going to use the word digitised or blurred. You could do that with a video.
I'm sure we can, and we're looking into it, Nick. I mean, I don't think we have anything to hide here, and I think if we can, we will.
Right.
But I think this just shows the difficulty of the situation, where we've got polarised views, particularly on social media, taking a view as to what happened. Nobody wants people to be upset, but equally the officers have got a job to do. And the reason we referred it, to be clear on this point, is because we're worried about public confidence. One of the main things we're trying to do is to build more trust here. We want the public to trust us. And it's clear that this incident has led to a section of community questioning their trust or damaging that trust. So one of the ways to deal with it, even though actually on my review I don't think the officers have done something wrong, but there's no criticism. I don't think it's a bad thing for us to ask an independent body, the IOPC, to say, well, look, can you have a look at this and see if there is anything that we didn't do right?
What's the tone of debate on social media then? Obviously I don't have access to your sites, but what is it?
It's anyone that follows people on Twitter will see. I mean, it's really toxic, but that's from both sides. So we've got people that are on one side of social media saying, the police are being defensive, they're not listening. And I think I tried really hard in our statement to say, look, we are listening. This is why we want to speak to the community. This is why we had a community meeting. And then on the other side, we've got people saying, you're not supporting your officers, which, again, we are supporting our officers. And the important point is, I don't think these are mutually exclusive things. I think we can listen to the community, we can take concerns, and we can learn from this type of operation. When working with Transport for London, we can learn and say, actually, whenever we're going out with revenue protection officers, is this something we want to do in this way? But also, we want to support our officers. We've got to give the officers the confidence that they're able to interact with the public and they're able to use their powers when necessary, when proportionate. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive now.